Your anxiety is stupid. It lies to you, it tricks you, it doesn't even make sense. And by the time I finish this ice cream cone, I'm gonna prove it to you. Number one, anxiety is not a bad thing, it's an important thing. Think about a few hours before you go on a date with your biggest crush. You're anxious as hell, but is that a bad thing? No, you get anxious when there's an important thing. Anxiety is a signal of importance. And if you're getting anxious about a bunch of stupid, unimportant things, it means you lack an important thing in your life. Imagine if the thing that scares you cured your mom's cancer. How scary would it be? That's right, you'd do it anyway. And that's the other thing. Anxiety will convince you that things are bigger and more unmanageable than they actually are. So that thing that you're afraid of, you will start inventing stories in your mind, imagining that it's this impossible feat, that there's all these complications and horrible, horrible repercussions, that the world's gonna end. But the truth is, the world doesn't really give a shit. See, the way the human mind works is that whatever you feel, you invent stories to justify. So if something feels scary, the mind quickly sets to inventing stories to justify being scared. One of the ways that you can turn these stories in your favor is by practicing something called negative visualization. Negative visualization is when you take those terrible stories in your head, the worst case scenario, the worst thing that could possibly happen, and you actually start planning the contingencies for it. You start imagining, okay, if I go in tomorrow and make a fool out of myself and lose my job, how would I react to that? Well, I'd go get another job. I could talk to friends in my network and see where other opportunities are. Hell, maybe one of those other opportunities might even be better than my current job. Wow, maybe that's not so bad after all. Maybe I should go in and say what I'm feeling. See, the thing is, when you start working through the contingencies, you start to realize that the worst case scenario, 9 times out of 10, actually isn't that bad. And speaking of which, you're terrible at predicting the future. I shouldn't have to tell you this, but ever try to pick stocks or bought a stupid meme coin or something? You realize how absolutely terrible you are at knowing what's gonna happen in the future. Why would it be any different with your fears? Why would you somehow miraculously be 100% accurate in your predictions of all the terrible things people are gonna think about you, but completely inaccurate in all the other areas of your life? I mean, if you're such a good prediction machine, why aren't you a fucking billionaire like Warren Buffett? Most social anxiety is secretly codependence in disguise. People who are terrified of what others are gonna think of them, it's not a social anxiety issue, it's a self-esteem issue. They've never learned how to say no to others, they've never learned how to disappoint others, they've never had something more important to stand up for than to be liked by others. And so their entire self-worth is based on the opinions of others. When you work through the codependence and you develop your own sense of self-worth, you realize none of that shit matters. Look, here's the thing that happens when you start saying no to people. The ones who actually care about you will respect you. In fact, they'll actually respect you more for saying no. And the ones who don't care about you will get pissed off and leave. In either situation, you're better off. God damn, this is good shit. Once you start developing the ability to say no to people and disappoint them a little bit, you'll come to a really profound realization, which is that nobody fucking gives a shit. All those things you're worried about in your head, nobody's worrying about it. They're too busy worrying about all the dumb narratives that they've invented in their head, all the stories that they've become anxious about. What you start to realize is that there's a kind of liberation in realizing that most of the things that you say and do don't matter. In the long run, people either aren't paying attention or it has no real repercussions on their lives. So, who gives a shit? By the way, your comparisons are terrible anyway. We all do this thing where when we compare ourselves to somebody, we only compare ourselves to the good things about that person. We don't think about all the bad things about that person. We don't think about all the sacrifices or rejections that they had to go through. It's easy to look at Bill Gates and think, wow, he has $100 billion. He's one of the most powerful people in the world. But did you know that Bill Gates went 30 years without taking a single day off or a single vacation? Do you envy that? When you look at famous athletes, it's easy to envy all of their accomplishments, their fame, their fortune, their incredible performances. But you realize half these guys didn't even have childhoods. They didn't have real friends. They were being followed around by the media when they were 16 yeyears old. Do you envy that? Do you want that in your life? By the way, you should get off your screens. Get off social media, fucking go outside, touch some grass. Not only does being on screens all the time give you these fucked up comparisons and unrealistic perspectives of what other people expect of you, but the blue light from screens has actually been scientifically shown to raise cortisol levels and adrenaline levels, which, guess what, leads to stress and anxiety. So once you turn the screens off, you should go talk to people face to face. Actually share some of your insecurities and anxieties, because this is going to accomplish a lot of things at once. For one, you're going to realize that most people relate to you. Most people have had similar insecurities and anxieties, and you're not alone. The second thing is, things are not such a big deal. There's this really powerful thing that happens when you verbalize all the feelings that are going on inside your head. You realize they're much smaller than you thought they were. They get miniaturized once the words leave your mouth. And by the way, this leads to the sponsor of this video, BetterHelp. BetterHelp is therapy wherever, whenever you need it. Did you know that over 40% of the people in the United States don't have access to mental health care? That's one of the things that BetterHelp is trying to solve. With BetterHelp, you can talk to your therapist through a text message, through a phone call, through Zoom meetings, however you want to do it. And if you're ever not satisfied, you can change a therapist at any time. Therapy is so important because it forces you to verbalize your anxieties and insecurities. And as soon as you verbalize them, they lose their power over you. So if you don't have access to a friend or a caring family member or just a random stranger who's going to give a shit, BetterHelp will provide one to you.
Going to therapy was one of the best decisions I ever made in my personal life. It helped me immensely in my growth journey and dealing with my emotional issues. I can honestly say that there's a good chance that you wouldn't even be listening to me right now if I never went to therapy.
Use the link in the description to get 10% off your first month and start talking to somebody, because it's honestly, it's more helpful than an ice cream cone. The most classic Stoic wisdom that applies to anxiety is to focus on what you control and try to ignore what you can't. The fact is, most things in life you cannot control, yet we get so caught up worrying about them, trying to predict them, trying to control them, trying to wish them to be something that they're not. And this causes so much unnecessary suffering in our lives. One of the most difficult things to do in life is to accurately gauge what is in your control and what is out of your control. One tool that can help you with this is, instead of creating a bucket list of all the things you want to do before you die, create a fuck it list, which is all the things that you refuse to give a shit about. This can help you deprioritize all the stuff that's outside of your control and is causing you to suffer unnecessarily. My fuck it list includes embarrassing myself in public. It includes reading and giving a shit about the hate comments on YouTube videos. I just refuse to be affected by it. You know what else can help you? Drink less caffeine, get more sleep, drink more water, eat more vegetables. I know I sound like your fucking grandmother, but it's true. And what you'll realize is that there's a real strong physiological connection between your mental state and your physical state. When you treat your body like shit, your body reacts with a lot of stress hormones, which generates more anxiety. But when you start treating your body well, your body processes everything much better, leveling out your hormones and helping you keep a level head on a day-to-day basis. And while we're on the subject of advice that grandma would give you, exercise. Exercise is like nature's antidepressant. Studies have shown that exercise is as effective as any other intervention for anxiety and depression. It could be something as simple as going for a walk, looking at some trees. There's a thing called the green effect, which is that when you're in nature and surrounded by green stuff, it helps you relax. And finally, if you're having a full-on panic attack, regulate your breathing. There's something called the 4-7-8 technique, which is breathe in for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 7 seconds, and then breathe out for 8 seconds. This will help regulate your nervous system and calm your body in the moment. Between these 3 things, you'll discover that so much of your anxiety is actually physiologically based. With these tools, you can help manage it better on a day-to-day basis. By the way, anxiety is just an emotion, and emotions aren't reality, they're just biological suggestions. We evolved emotions as a form of feedback to help us survive, but our emotions are often wrong or completely irrational. They make no fucking sense. I mean, when you were a kid, you used to be terrified of a monster under your bed. Have you ever seen a monster under your bed? I think not. So why would your anxieties today be any different? So much of anxiety is about control. If you really want to lock in your physical health and help stay focused on the things that you can control in your life, implement more of a routine. Routine helps you spend time on things that you can control. It helps you give a sense of purpose and a pattern to everything that you do. So much of anxiety is just about uncertainty. It's about not knowing what's going to happen or what could potentially happen. And so the more you create routines around your life, the more you limit external variables and the more you diminish the anxiety. This is what the greats throughout history did. Churchill suffered from intense anxiety and depression, and he had very rigid routines that he worked in, and he kept certain people around him at all times. Lincoln, same thing. Emily Dickinson had massive amounts of anxiety, yet she channeled it into some of the most beautiful art that's ever been created. All of these people built systems of routines in their lives and found people around them to help manage their anxiety and help them excel. Any emotion, whether it's anxiety or anger or sadness or whatever, it's just energy that needs to be channeled in some productive output. So find the systems and routines that help you channel your anxiety in a positive direction. Now, you probably didn't know that. You probably assume that every successful person is fucking fearless. And the fact is they're not. They've done a lot of research on people who are higher performers, and they found that high performers actually don't experience less stress or anxiety than other people. High performers simply have a different orientation towards that stress and anxiety. High performers see stress and anxiety as an important moment for them to be present, focused, and step up, whereas other people see stress and anxiety as something to be avoided and something to diminish and get rid of. So stop fighting against the anxiety and instead see it for what it is. Because ultimately, you have to realize that we're all wrong about everything. You know, when I was in my 20s, I thought marriage was a social institution of oppression. Now I've been married for like a decade. Things change. Our beliefs change, our minds change, and you have to realize that everything that you're afraid of today, you're gonna have a different perspective on years from now. Start opening yourself to those perspectives today, and they will have less of a hold on you. Because ultimately, there's a little bit of success and failure in every experience that you have. We like to imagine that experiences in the future are gonna be 100% success or 100% failure, and the truth is, no matter how well or bad things go, they have a little bit of both inside them. Your successes, after you've experienced them, you realize that there are lots of trade-offs and sacrifices that you didn't anticipate. There's lots of headaches that come with achieving your dreams that you didn't think about. Whereas the failures, they come with lessons and insights that you never would have had otherwise. And finally, if none of that shit convinced you, imagine you're on your deathbed. You're surrounded by your kids and your grandkids and everybody you ever cared about. You look back at a life, you're like 90 years old, you've accomplished all these things, and then somebody says something that reminds you of that thing that you're worried about today. How serious is it really? How much do you think you're really gonna care? Chances are, it's not gonna matter at all. Good luck.